Hi there, I'm Woolly Wormhead and I'm a knit designer specialising in knitted hats, technique and construction. And for today's tutorial, I'm going to talk to you about slipped stitch selvedges, the edges that we can add to our sides of our knitted fabric, and I'm going to demonstrate using garter stitch. I tend to like using garter stitch. I find it a very versatile fabric and I do a number of designs in it. Now I'm going to show you two ways of achieving a slipped stitch selvage. Um, my favorite method I used in this book. Yeah, this is a book all of modular knit hats. Now, the reason why I'm talking about this is because the slip stitch selvage that I use primarily is used heavily in this book, and it is a particularly pretty edge. It's a very neat edge, but it's also a very versatile edge because it allows things like modular hats to be knit much more easily and done in the round with a minimal finishing. This is one of the hats from the book, and all of these squares are just joined. You just pick up the stitches and you knit going around. It's minimal finishing. There's very little breaking of the yarn, very few ends to weave in. In fact, the book tells you how to make the mitre squares in the round and everything. And the thing that makes it really easy is my preferred method of doing a slipped stitch selvage. And since I published this book, Cuboidal, which is available in print and in digital format from my website, other knitters that kind of use mitre squares in different ways have also started to kind of use this particular selvage treatment because it makes picking up your stitches really, really easy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to the overhead. I'm going to show you the two ways that you can create this edge. We're going to compare them so you can see which is neater and which is you prefer. And then show you how you can pick up the stitches for it so you can create beautiful hats like these. All right, I mean, this is one of my favorites from the book. You wear it asymmetrically like a cloche, and it's, again, it's minimal finishing. So the wonderful thing about this entire collection is because it works on the properties of garter stitch and having a slip stitch selvage that's very easy to pick up stitches and reduces the amount of finishing you have to do. All right, so let's switch over to the other head and have a look. Okay, then we have got here one swatch that I've worked in a worsted weight yarn, and it has a standard regular bind off at the top, which creates all these lovely rows of V's. I used a crochet cast on, which is something else I recommend in the Cuboidal collection, but it's something I use a lot in some of my garter stitch patterns because it's created in exactly the same way as a crochet provisional cast on, except you use it in the main yarn. And I like it because it's a versatile cast on. It's one that you can use mid-row. I'll do another tutorial about that another time. But it also perfectly mirrors a standard bind off. Okay, so there's the cast on edge and there's the bind off edge. It's all right. So when you're working with patterns, especially kind of like in sideways knit hats, which is what I tend to do a lot, if you have any sections that kind of like elongate down, and it's really, really nice to have edges that mirror so that they look the same. And you can use the same for kind of lots of different projects. If you're working a scarf or a shawl and you want mirrored edges, these are the way to do it. Now, if you really want to turn it up a notch, then you want an edge treatment that looks the same. And this is the slip stitch selvage. You may well be familiar with it. There's two ways of achieving it. I'm going to show you both today and tell you my reasons for my preference and the why I think this one is better. But what it does on this square, we can see that it is continuous all the way around. All right, look at that. You can have that finish in your projects really easy, and it just one of those things that really kind of makes the project look more polished, the way that you can finish it. All right, so that's just a regular garter stitch swatch, but it's really nice to have those edges. They have less of a bias in this technique compared to the other technique, the second technique that most people are probably familiar with. It lays fatter, it's smoother, but I'll get the swatches out and I'll show you what I mean by that. Okay then, so this is the first swatch of the two methods that I'm going to show you, and this uses the technique that most people are probably familiar with for creating slipped stitch selvedges. I'm working on these little skinny swatches because How we create these selvedges depends on the treatment of the first and last stitches. So I need to be able to knit through the row to show you what you need to do. And if you've got long rows here, you're going to be sitting here watching me do garter stitch all the time, and we don't want that. So that's why I'm working on these skinny swatches. So this one, I find for me, I get loose stitches along the edge. Okay, and that's not something I particularly like. I find it's quite messy. It can be quite helpful if I'm picking up and going and knitting in another direction. So it does depend on what you're going to do with the stitches afterwards. But I find that it's not as neat. And it's not just the edge stitch, it's the stitch in from the edge that's not as neat there as well. I don't know if you can see that there, but it's a little bit loose. I also find that this method, the edges have a bias, i.e. they lean one way or another. This edge leans towards that way and that edge leans towards the back. And again, depending on what you do with it, that might not be ideal. When I am working like that big swatch I showed you at the beginning, I like to have my edges balanced so that they both kind of like sit centrally and they're not biased in any particular way. So this might not be ideal for you. But again, it depends what you're doing. Now, I've already started this selvage, and it starts by having the yarn at the back. And then we create this edge by bringing the yarn round and knitting the first stitch. So we go in there and knit it like that. I'm now going to knit across to the end. And as we come towards the last stitch, we bring the yarn forward and we slip this stitch purlwise, and then we turn. All right. And then we just carry on. We knit this one again. We knit to the edge. So you just knit all the way across. And then we bring the yarn forward and we purl it, slip it purlwise, sorry. And that is basically how we create that particular selvage. Now I'm going to bring in its companion. I'm going to switch over now and I'm going to show you how the other one works. Okay, so this second swatch I have here is for the other method that I want to show you for creating a slit stitch selvage. I find it's quicker. I find it's neater, and it generally gives a more balanced lay of the stitches, and the stitches that sit in from the edge aren't quite as loose. I think overall it looks tidier. It still has plenty of stretch, and if you want to pick up the stitches and knit in a different direction, then you can still do that. But it's quicker to knit, and because it's quicker to knit, it's also quicker and easier to put to write into a pattern. Now, because I've already done the end treatment for this stitch that's on the end here, I'm going to slip this knitwise. I'm going to knit to the end. And as we approach the last stitch, instead of bringing the yarn forward, well, we are going to bring it forward, but we're not going to do any slipping. We're actually going to purl that last stitch. All right. Doesn't matter which type of knitting you do, which style of knitting you do, you're still going to purl at the end. One more row, knitwise, knit to the end. And then when you get to the last stitch, you purl it. You purl it, not slip it. I'm doing the wrong one, so you purl it. See, I'm getting in a muddle here, trying to do between the two swatches. So let's bring the other one in and have a look at that to compare it. This is more balanced. It doesn't have a bias. You can see that this one is slightly looser and it leans towards the back. And on this side, it leans in towards the front. This one, the edges are pretty similar. And the stitches next to them here, look at them, particularly that will be loose there, and it's probably the same underneath is loose along there. Now, from a pattern writing point of view, for this one, you'd start the row with, say, slip stitch knitwise, knit to end, bring yarn forward. No, sorry, I'll say that again. This one is knit stitch, knit to the end, bring yarn forward, slip stitch purlwise, and then you knit again and you go on. This one, you do the slipping at the other end. You slip the first stitch knitwise, knit to the end, and then you purl this one at the end here. So it's actually kind of quicker to write into a pattern as well as being quicker to knit. So those are the two methods. Try them out, see which ones you prefer. But what I'm going to do next is I'm going to show you one of the things that I really, really love about this kind of selvage when it comes to picking up stitches and modular and multi-directional knitting. These V's along the edge make things really easy. So I'm going to go and get the other swatch and I'm going to show you what to do next. Okay, so having just shown you the two ways that you could create a slip stitch selvage, I want to show you one of the really, really fantastic things that you can do with the slip stitch selvage and why it makes picking up stitches easier. I introduced earlier some of the hats in my Cuboidal collection, and this is another example. I've got loads of examples here. Now, bring them up to the camera. You can see that they're all perfectly neat in the way that the squares are worked onto each other because we've picked up stitches from the last square worked. We do it for working in the round, we do it for working flat. But what I wanted to show you was how you can actually do that yourself on your swatch to practice with, or if you're doing one of the Cuboidal hats or you're doing any other kind of modular knitting. So I'm now going to switch back over to the overhead. I've got some contrast yarn, I've got my original square swatch, and I'm going to show you how you can easily pick up stitches from that slip stitch selvage. Okay, so let's get our needle. I have the grey yarn here and I have this swatch that I showed you earlier. Now, these V's make it really easy for being able to pick up and knit along the edges. You would simply put your needle in under both legs of the V and you knit it. There's no mistaking which part you have to pick up. It's so much easier, except when your yarn splits. Let's get back on, that's it. And you just keep going like this. And it's really, really simple to do because you don't have to remember how many stitches to do. You don't have to, on a regular garter stitch edge, you don't have to worry about which part of the edge you're picking up. You're just going straight underneath each V like that. And then it makes it very, very easy for multi-directional knitting, especially because if you need to pick up around a corner, you just go around the corner and carry on picking up underneath the chains. And on the back, it looks rather neat too. In fact, you could treat this as a right side if you're working in the same colour and leave that decorative edge along. Because why not? Because it, it's a nice feature. So that's an extra little thing that you can do with it. It's very, very easy. It makes modular knitting easy. It makes it nice and quick. It's neat, far neater than other methods of picking up along a garter stitch edge. You could try this on stocking stitch. I haven't, but you could certainly give it a go. See how easy that is to do. And look at that edge you get. All right, I hope this helps. And I hope that's given you an overview of the two different kind of main methods of creating a slipped stitch selvage. The differences between them, as you might want to experiment and try which one works best for you with your knitting style and your gauge, and even your yarn will make a difference. And then kind of like consider trying some modular hats maybe and seeing where you get with it, because it is fun once you start going knitting in different directions. But either way, even if you're not interested in modular knitting at all, these edges give a nice finish to garter stitch. They're particularly good because they balance out each other as well as mirror kind of the cast on and cast off. So they give that kind of like nice refined touch to the end of your knitting. Please do the YouTube thing of clicking subscribe and liking and sharing if this tutorial has been helpful to you. We've got a lot more in the works to come. So thanks for following. And also thank you to my Patreons, because they are the people that help me make free content, because without them I wouldn't have the means to be able to create free tutorials on whether it's on YouTube or on my blog or my free patterns on my blog. So thank you very much, my patrons, and happy hatting. and enjoy your knitting.